Okay, hello, welcome everyone to this session for Out of Focus. It's great to be here. My name is Craig Pennington. I'm from Bidolito, which is a music magazine based up in Liverpool, and I also will run a brand new live music venue called Future Yard when we can open, hopefully later next month, up in Birkenhead on the Wirral in sunny Merseyside. So thanks very much everyone for tuning in today. We've got a fantastically esteemed panel of guests who are here to basically talk about the live sector and the impact of what's happened over the past few months on the live sector. We'll share some kind of anecdotes of all of our individual experiences and the impacts that what's happened has had on our businesses and our livelihoods and our careers and the work that we do. And also look to the future and look at what possible green shoots there might be and what a kind of roadmap might look like for getting out of the situation that we find ourselves in. So before we get stuck into all that, I think I'd like to just first ask each of the people on the webinar, on the panel, to introduce themselves, say hello, say who they are and where they're based, and maybe just to very, very briefly just say suppose how what you do has been changed by COVID. Give us a brief introduction so that people who are on the call or watching the webinar will have an idea of where you're coming at it from. So if we can start, we can't go left to right because everyone will be in different orders. Sam, if we can start with you, is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. I'm Sam. I run Le Pub in Newport, which is a community-owned art space and music venue. I also am the Welsh coordinator for the Wonderful Music Venue Trust. And for that, we basically try and help venues get through this horrific period. I think my life changed in two ways with the lockdown. One, the pub was obviously shut down for a long time. We're now open and trading again, but just purely, it's seated, there's no gigs, there's no music. And then the lovely Bev and Mark offered me a job working for them, helping venues that are in crisis. And that's been really good fun. So pluses and minuses, I think.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Thanks for that, Sam. Googie?
My name is Googie. I based in Galway on the west coast of Ireland. I own the Roisin Dubh, which is one of the main music venues for the west coast of Ireland. I also booked the Galway International Arts Festival, Big Top, and I do production management for the Comedy Carnival in Galway. I also have a record label and artist management company called Strange Brew, where I have about 8 to 10 artists on the label. And I suppose my business was completely decimated from the venue point of view. We were one of the first pubs in Ireland to close. We did so voluntarily because we thought it was a good move for our staff and our customers. We've been closed since the 14th or 15th of March, so our busiest time of the year. Festivals gone. Currently, Ireland venues and we're getting very, very little support from the government. You can only open a pub if you're serving food, which we don't do. We're looking into it now. And at the moment, even the guidelines for doing seated gigs are incredibly hazy and contradictory. So we have no idea what's going on. From the management point of view, as we all know, my Axe tours were completely wiped out. One of my bands released an album in March, which they couldn't tour. I have another one coming out in September, which has been pushed back to October. And obviously he can't tour that either, which is hugely damaging to the release. But let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of conversations like this, which I'm sure we all have with colleagues around the country and around Europe, and it never ceases to just have an impact on you how much of a devastating blow this has been to everyone. So yeah, I feel you. I can hear you, man. Hopefully we can, by the end of this conversation, at least maybe kind of set out some hope and some kind of pathways for the future. We shall see. We can but hope. Beverly, could you maybe give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been up to?
Yes. It's very difficult to do a little overview. Okay, my name's Beverly Whittrick, or Bev Whittrick. I run the Music Venue Trust. My title is Strategic Director, so I run it along with Mark David, who's the CEO. It was his idea. I helped him create it, but I do the day-to-day running and manage the team. It's a charity that protects, secures and improves grassroots music venues across the whole UK. So we've always set ourselves a bit of a challenge because we work England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and never has it come home to us how challenging that is, as during the last few months, because obviously we're having a lot of conversations 4 times with 4 different lots of government or 4 lots of funding bodies. So that in itself is really quite challenging, particularly when I'm not actually in the UK at all. So this is my home office. I actually live just outside Barcelona and it's stinking hot. And I haven't set foot in the UK since I left it on the 9th of March, which was just after I saw you, Craig, at Unconvention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we are a very dispersed team. We've gone from the core team of MVT is 5. And at which point, early on, we were 1 in the Netherlands, 2 in London and 2 in Barcelona. We're now 18 because we've taken on people like Sam and we've taken on a lot of coordinators across the country. So I'm managing now my core team and then Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish and regions of England coordinators so that we can talk most effectively, not only to the governments and the funding bodies, but also to every single venue with whom we work. And that's also blossomed. We had, in January, we had 600 members of our Music Venues Alliance. We now have over 900 venues in the Music Venues Alliance. So we have a lot more venues to try and work with individually, to try and advise and guide through funding applications, crowdfunding, what they can and can't do. And then if it comes to it, to our crisis service. So in order to do all that, we have been fundraising. Hopefully people have seen the Save Our Venues campaign. And we're still at it, basically. I think Mark said it was day 186 or something of the work we've been doing since the 9th of March. And, you know, we carry on.
Wow. Yeah, and do keep up that good work. As I've mentioned before the call started, that the help of the MVT to us trying to open a new music venue has been absolutely essential, and we couldn't have kept the show on the road without it. So thank you and keep it up. Rob, if you could.
I'm Rob, and booking agent at the Empire Agency, which is a boutique agency based in the USA and UK. UK is where I'm based, and I primarily book everywhere in Europe and UK and represent around 22 to 23 artists, most of which were pulled immediately off the road in various parts of the world from 8th to 9th of March. My first call, I think, was from a tour manager in, I think it was Spain off the top of my head. And it was him saying that the promoters just come up to him saying that they're closing down the venue during a sound check. So at that moment, everything was like a domino effect. And it was kind of along the lines of sheer panic of how are we going to get all these people home, because they were scattered everywhere. But we did it. And now I like to see myself as a rescheduling agent.
Perennial kind of process of rescheduling. Yeah. We'll probably come on to that, I would imagine, during this conversation. Thanks for that, Rob. Bev, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hiya. So I'm Bev, and I'm like Rob. I'm now a rescheduling booker at the moment. So just moving festivals everywhere. So I program and book festivals, events, corporate parties, and the whole lot has just disappeared for this year. I run Killer Bee Music, and we mainly run in the independent sector, so festivals like Wood Festival, Black Deer, and so for the past few months I've just been picking up whole festival bills and moving them. Wood, we were going to try and go end of September back in March when this all kicked off, but just now had to pick that up and move that into the May dates, fingers crossed, in 2021. So just trying to figure out if we're going to have a festival season next year.
if we can maybe just because it's a point that you've made and builds on from what Rob was talking about, that process of kind of rebooking or rescheduling, and that kind of being in almost constant kind of turnover. I think the shows that we have booked in our venue, I think we're on our third round of kind of dates on all of those. What impact does that have on I suppose you, both yourself and Rob as individuals, but also on the artists and the whole kind of like infrastructure of the teams around them?
Well, for me, for the festivals so far, I mean, touch wood, I've been very lucky that the agents that I deal with and do business with have been very supportive. I've heard some horror stories from some other genres, but for me, it's kind of, especially with Wood Festival, which is not a particularly, it's not a large scale festival at all. It's 1,500 all in all. But third time of having to move it. But everybody has been really fantastic because everyone's in the same boat. They all want to get out and book and play as soon as they can. So a lot of the bands that I've already booked just want to keep hold of those bookings if they can, and also the routings, because a lot of the routings that I do, I have a lot of I work with a lot of bookers from other Americana festivals, for say like Black Deer, and we have a strong routing together that as independents we want to keep. We don't want any of the big boys grabbing hold of our bands, so we're trying to keep not just our festivals in the game, but keeping everybody's festivals together so we can keep those routings in place. So the bands have got something to come back to 2021. But again, it all depends on the artist. We have artists of all kinds of levels. I think from the Black Deer lineup, we lost one artist. So we've been exceptionally lucky with the support of the agents so far to be able to rebook or reschedule time and time again.
Rob, is that pretty consistent with your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're all in the same boat, and no one wants to see anyone fail or lose here. I mean, for me personally, I've been doing this for 10, 11 years now, and I've never seen such a united front across the entire industry supporting each other, which is really, really good. And it's important because we all want to be here next year and in 2022 and beyond. We've already seen some leave us already, which is sad, and we're all just trying to stop that from happening. And yeah, postponing is just hard. Rescheduling is difficult because the more and more you do it, the more and more plans are pushed back. And there are bands that had plans for next year that weren't going out this year. We've now got to look at pushing that back to as far as 2022 potentially for them. So it's all very much up in the air, but we're professionals. We do this for a reason. We're good at it. So I'm sure we can all make it work some way.
Yeah, definitely.
For the Galway International Arts Festival this year, we did the same thing as well. So we had 7 or 8 shows booked for the Big Top, and I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it was, moving the likes of Flaming Lips, Pixies, Kaiser Chiefs, John Hopkins, but we were pretty much able to pick them up and move them to the same dates next year. In one case, to a more favourable date, which was nice. If we can go ahead with that in July. The only problem that I see with that is the original dates have all passed now, and as far as I'm aware, the legality of refunds is that people are actually entitled to refunds until after, at any stage. I would have thought that it would have kind of been common sense that once the original date is passed and you're into the rescheduled date, that you're essentially into a new ticket contract. But the law is not really on the side, so that's a bit of a nightmare because no show is ever going to be sold out again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably one that'd be good to get some clarity on. I didn't realise that was the situation.
You're able to get, once the show is rescheduled, you're able to get a refund at any point, at any stage, even after the show is passed, apparently.
Just picking up on something that you mentioned there, Googie, just before. Obviously, you wear 2 hats, one from a programming booking perspective, and also with the way that you do the label with an artist management. Obviously, like the live sector over the past couple of decades has taken on its role within the scheduling and kind of like release scheduling around artists kind of campaigns has changed hugely. You know, obviously back in the day, artists would go out to support the album, whereas nowadays a recorded product can often be a piece of merch that supports a live tour, and more money is being made, and more of an emphasis is on live performance and on touring. Have you seen with the artists that you work that impact that's had on their broader campaigns because they can't tour?
Yeah, I mean, it started with the lower level acts as well, where you're not talking, you know, people are going out and playing to 1,000 people plus. The touring is really important to promote their albums. When you're at a higher level, maybe it's not it's not the same thing, but they really rely on it because of the extra PR they get, and certainly any festivals they pick up in other countries makes a huge difference to album sales and Spotify playlists and things like that. But what has been really interesting and what has been a lifesaver for so many independent acts is Bandcamp Friday, because the amount of merch people have been shifting, and people have been very clever releasing limited edition merches and putting out live sessions on cassettes, you know, stuff that's easy to turn around quickly. And the support, Bandcamp are the heroes of lockdown. They've really stepped up, and that Bandcamp Friday thing is just amazing. Seeing the orders come in, they've tapered off. But the first Bandcamp Friday, I shipped 150 packages, which was, you know, a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose that picks up on. I think Rob mentioned before around the kind of the galvanizing kind of effect that what's happened over the last few months has really had on across the sector and across the industry. And you know, we've seen that. I've seen that in troves, and I think that you're right. Bandcamp's Fridays have really kind of like almost kind of like set the standard for that, really. And goes back to the culture of Bandcamp and where it comes from and why it exists. It's, you know, it's in a world of kind of mono verticals, it's really encouraging to see such a platform with a strong voice being used in such a positive way. Sam, could I ask you to maybe just explore something that you mentioned earlier? You mentioned that the venue's been open as a pub, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're doing food as well as drink in the pub. Is that right?
Yeah, we never really intended to do much food. We noticed there was a massive gap in Newport for vegan food. Yeah. So we set up a tiny kitchen, and we kind of thought we might do maybe 25 burgers a week. But then the vegan explosion happened, and it's become a massive income thread now, which is great. And during lockdown, we did deliveries twice a week, and we managed to pull some money in that way. And now we're open doing food. And a lot of our regulars that come for the gigs, they're still coming to the pub just because they want to sit in the place they miss the gigs in, if it makes sense. They know there's not going to be a band playing, but it still feels a little bit like they're in touch with the live music scene just by coming to the pub for a beer. So it's okay.
I suppose I had one question around that, and if I remember rightly, this is touched on in one of the MVT's How to Set Up a Live Music Venue books, which I devoured maybe a year ago, and would recommend as essential reading to anyone who's interested in running a live venue or kind of upskilling on some of their kind of knowledge if they're already doing so. My feeling is, and I think that, you know, a lot of people working in the industry would probably support this, that for a long time tickets have been too cheap and booze has been too expensive, and we've had this skew in the sector where essentially booze has underpinned the live experience, and there's been fear amongst promoters to push those ticket prices up. I'm probably talking more in the kind of middle and bottom end of the market than the top of the market, admittedly. Do you think that might change?
Well, as a bar owner as well, I just like take whatever about ticket prices, and maybe this whole thing will add value to ticket prices, and people will go back to paying a decent price to see a band. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but certainly in my venue, I don't think the beer is overpriced, because after you pay all your costs, you're not making a whole lot of money out of it. You know, to pay a band 500 quid, you know, we do a lot of free shows. If you're paying a band 500 quid, you have to take in $3,500 at the bar, $3,000 maybe to cover that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think drink is overpriced. I think the tickets are probably maybe the free shows like that have been diluting desire to pay money to see bands, but I mean, you've got to introduce people to bands somehow as well. and selling
Yeah.
drinks.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at a lot of the kind of the bigger players in the commercial sector, especially kind of in the northwest of England, I don't think there'd be much disagreement with the fact that the disparity between the cost of the booze in comparison to the cost of the ticket is skewed. That would be my experience.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to run our venue based on the profit we make from gigs.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I can give stats for the UK. I mean, in the UK, basically 35% of the takings come from tickets and 65% come from other activities. And obviously, chief amongst that is bar or food, merch, you know, other activities they do. And it's one of those really, really tricky things where it's kind of obvious that there should be more money for the venue from the tickets. And yet at the same time, obviously, the ticket money is what largely goes to the artist. And the fees are pretty low. I mean, we're still on 50 quid for a support band in a lot of the grassroots music sector. And, you know, that hasn't changed in 20 years.
Yeah.
But the expectations of what people think they should be paying at grassroots music level are still so incredibly low that you do have a really strange situation where sometimes people are prepared to pay more for the pint than they are for the ticket. And I remember a conversation with Sam many years ago when we actually were in the early days of Music Venue Trust. And she was doing, I think, 3 local bands for 2 quid and said people were moaning about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you consider how much it costs to go to a cinema, which is a finished piece of art, it's not a live experience. It's really quite shocking that people's expectations are to pay so little to be part of something that is a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, people will pay 9 quid to go to the cinema, but will turn their nose up at £7 for some local artist. And just I mean, I hear you, Googie, and I if you're paying 500 quid to an artist on a free ticket, like, hats off to you, man. And I hope you do £3.5 over the bar. That's fantastic. So,
I think I've been banging on for years about the fact that people won't pay what bands are worth. And no matter how much we all hate that, it hasn't changed. So I've also been banging on. I think I did a panel with Bev at Focus Wales last year where I listed everything venues can do to add income streams, because you're not going to make enough money off ticket sales until people start to value grassroots music. And that's a really important part of the work I think that Bev and Mark have done, is that grassroots music venues are now far more highly valued than they were 6 or 7 years ago. You know, we're no longer the toilet circuit. We're now a really important building block of the music industry. And slowly those attitudes are changing. But I think in terms of venues, they do need to add other income streams like our food, and we have beers that nowhere else in Newport sells, and and we have a photo booth, and it's a depressing way of having to look at it. But if you want a venue to survive, you have to have other income streams, and that has never been more true now, where we've opened without gigs, and despite being primarily a music venue, we're on around 65% of turnover of the average week. I mean, it's not great long term, but it's enough to get us through any immediate crisis. And I just think a lot of venues need to start looking at a way of adding, income streams and diversifying what they do.
Well, I can certainly speak to the value of a photo booth, because that that does well for us. But I don't think it's necessarily maybe I just misunderstood the way you said it there, but it's not necessarily the venues who aren't paying what the bands are worth. It's the customers.
Well, we pay the bands. We pay the bands plenty of money. It's the customers that are undervaluing the bands, not us. We pay bands £300-400, and we charge 3-4 quid in, and we should be charging a tenner in. The bands are worth every penny, but people just won't pay it, and then the bands play to no one, and it's a waste of everyone's time. And it's just, I don't know how to tackle that.
But Craig, without taking over from you asking the questions, is that not a problem for the entire industry, from the agents to the artists, the managers, promoters, venues?
100%.
Because I feel like, and this is the one good thing that I think is going to come out of COVID, is that I think everyone is almost to blame for this. We've lost focus of the general public, the fans of the live music. And even though we can put all this stuff into the venue, it's, why aren't they paying these tickets? Why aren't they coming to see these amazing artists live? And it's these people we need to talk to. And one thing I've noticed during this pandemic is the artists are starting to invest more of their time into the fan base, which is the most important thing. You know, you have a band like Haim who just invited 100 of their fans to do a Zoom call, and they taught them a dance to come to their show next year, which I love. And you've got smaller bands doing that as well. They're doing pub quizzes. You've got someone like Fen Lily who's doing bathtub sessions where she's interviewing other artists, and all these amazing things are going on where you're able to, the fans are connecting, having almost like a one-on-one time. And I think that's going to help build and bring these people to the venues next year. And the other thing is I'm hoping it's going to be appreciated a lot more as well. We're going to be nearly a year without live music as we know it. So that's going to have been missed by a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's the rub of the point that I was trying to make, is that, you know, it's about that value proposition, which I think has been forgotten. You know, it's about the artist. It's about the artist and that live experience and that connection, which is what has become more important and people are missing more than ever. I think there's probably an opportunity for us as venues and as promoters to value that, and we'll see those ticket prices maybe come in line a little bit with what they potentially should be. Just to, we could talk about just that all day, but just to pick up a couple of different points. We've spoken a lot about venues and support, the great work the MVT have done around support. Promoters and festival kind of, you know, festival organisers, festival promoters haven't really come into that kind of conversation in the same way. And obviously festivals have been so devastated by what's happened. I just want to maybe, Bev, maybe start with you quickly, if you wouldn't mind. How do you think that the festival sector has been valued and supported during this whole thing?
Terribly, absolutely terribly. I mean, we're still waiting to hear about grants and all kinds of things, but it's you know, at the start of this, we needed the government to turn around and say, okay, we are cancelling all mass gatherings, which never happened. So it was down to us as the festivals to pull the plug, which left us wide open to agents potentially going, okay, great, send me the fee, you know, and, you know, because there was three major hurdles for us to get over, which were each one of them was really scary. One, do we have a festival next year? Do our shareholders and investors think that we can carry on the festival next year? Can they take the hit for a year, possibly more? So for a lot of my festivals, that was the first big question. Yes, we can. Great. Second question was, if we pull the plug, if we cancel, are we going to take a massive hit financially, or are we going to be supported? And again, thank God, touch wood, the agents were fully supportive in that area for us. But that gave me a few sleepless nights, because we were responsible for pulling the plug. And as every contract says, if you cancel, and the third big hurdle for us was then going to our community and our ticket buyers and telling them that we cancelled, and hoping that as many of them that had bought tickets were able to take the tickets over into the following year. Luckily, with Black Deer, for example, I was able to rebook the whole festival. So when we dropped the bomb, we were able to say, but don't worry, all of the bands bar one are coming with us. So that was great for us, because our refund rate was right down compared to quite a few festivals. So far it's been super hard. We don't know what's going to happen next year. There's no, you know, I think towards the end of October is when we're going to find out or get more information through. But you know, we're programming and booking now. You know, we're talking to suppliers and God knows whoever else and staff, and we need to know now what's happening or what we're going to be looking at for 2021, if festivals at all.
What's your sense from obviously talking to other people who run festivals or program them? Do you get the impression that anyone's been kind of able to access any of the government support? So any of the cultural recovery funding? I mean, is that because it feels hard when you look at how a lot of it's framed around support for core overheads and costs and building costs, to see how festivals access that?
Well, I mean, it depends on, I mean, every festival's different, and, you know, we don't have with Black Deer, for example, we don't have a Black Deer office. Everybody's kind of freelance that kind of is around the country. I'm based in, my office is in London. I work out of an agent's office in London. So, but, you know, there's various different festivals applying for different grants. I know we're kind of looking at them at the moment. So it's grants, it's also loans that people are looking at. I know some people that are family-owned festivals are going for loans themselves, you know. So everybody's different as to what kind of setup they have backdoor with shareholders, investors, etc. But I think we're just waiting for more information, I believe, on this arts grant and how it's going to be divvied up between the different arts and venues and festivals and galleries, etc.
Okay. Just thinking about another, I mean, I'm currently in the midst of risk assessments at the moment, looking at this. Social distancing and the feasibility of social distancing within live music obviously is just such a kind of like an issue at the moment when it comes to trying to getting places back open and getting shows happening again. Sam, what's your kind of take on the prospect of doing shows with social distancing in your venue?
So we have two rooms. One is the bar and one is the venue. So the capacity of the bar with social distancing is 43, which means, you know, we can seat 43 customers. The capacity of the venue with social distancing is 17. So once we've got 3 bands, a tech and a cashier in, we don't have any tickets to sell. It's not financially viable at all. And I think I mean, Bev obviously has access to more information than me. I only have the Welsh venues capacities at my fingertips, but I think 95% of grassroots music venues are finding themselves in exactly that position. Once we fit the bands and the staff in, there's no room for customers. So who's buying the tickets? Do we ask the support bands not to watch the main band? Do we ask the main band not to watch the support bands just so that we can sell 10 tickets? It's just not. It's not going to work. I cannot see a way that grassroots music venues as a whole will be able to put on gigs again until there's some kind of vaccine or something else that means that social distancing is done with.
And are those numbers at 2 meters, or is that down at 1 with the mitigating kind of intervention?
That's 2 meters.
I
we go up to 40.
Make a lot of difference really between 1 and 2. I mean, you know, we did a big exercise earlier in the year as part of our Reopen Every Venue Safely project, where we asked venues across the whole UK to do the calculations on 2 meters and 1 meter. And actually, the reason it doesn't make a lot of difference is it's not to do with sort of your dance floor or your bit in front of the stage. It's to do with your flow of people around the building. And where it's a real kicker for smaller venues is, of course, if you think about a typical grassroots music venue, an awful lot of them are basement or first floor rooms. So actually, it's the staircase that's the problem. Yeah. And it's to do with, you know, passing spaces and flow through and all of those issues. And so we do have a small number of venues that think they can make things work in certain ways, and a certain amount of remodeling has happened. You know, I do know venues around the country who have created seated space that they didn't have before because they've seen a way to invest in that. Some venues, you know, really could see a market for like Le Pub, where they would open as a bar and they would have loyal clientele that would want to come and support, or they're going to do a bit of food or whatever. But for some other venues, they don't have that sort of audience, particularly if they do a real mix of genres, and therefore they have all these different audiences for different things. They perhaps don't have people that would think to go there for a drink and literally only go there for the live entertainment. So there's like a real shopping list of different factors that come into how feasible it is to open. And I think when England was allowed to first put live entertainment on, I think the calculation was that 11% of venues could, but a lot of people were being held back from doing that because of the potential of local lockdown, then, you know, nailing the coffin of anything they organised, because a lot of venues that were considering it put things in place for the 1st of August. And then the day before that was like, no, you can't do it. we'll let you know when we can. That then moved to 2 weeks later, and people who'd lost money on that 1st of August organisation went, okay, just going to wait a while and see what happens. So there are many different models across the UK, but basically the answer to everything is that very limited activity is possible with distancing, and really the only way for that to happen so that artists and crews and all the teams that need to get back to work can happen is for what was previously considered the commercial bit of the music industry to be subsidized in the way that the rest of the cultural sectors is subsidized. And that's what's been behind the drive to encourage what's previously been seen more as music industry to apply for the pots of money from Arts Council England, or, you know, we've got ones developing with Creative Scotland, Arts Council Wales, Creative Wales. We hope at some stage Arts Council Northern Ireland, but they're the slowest of the 4 nations. And, you know, it's incredibly variable around the UK, but it's been really interesting having conversations with people who, you know, on a tough night, they just won't pay themselves because they want the gig to happen, to explain that in other cultural buildings and other cultural organisations, the staff get paid whether the gig's successful or not, or whether the show's successful or not. So actually, if you are going for public funding, you probably should put at least a living wage in for yourself, because other cultural professionals do get paid.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting discourse there about the whole idea of applying for funding, that of course the vast majority of smaller venues and festivals would never have considered before, and now they're having to sort of learn how that works and try and squeeze what they do into the formulae that are being demanded for them to be assessed alongside theatre or opera or ballet or galleries. You know, as Bev said, it's about that. In the bigger pots, you're up against every other art form and every scale of organisation, project, and every level of experience as well. So it's very daunting times, because the first round of the Culture Recovery Fund for England is going to be announced on the 5th of October. And until that happens, we have absolutely no idea how much support there will be for music. We've been very lucky in England that we had our emergency grassroots music venue fund, which some of the successes from that have been announced. But for the wider sector, we're all still waiting to see how that goes at the moment.
Googie, could you just talk a bit about your venue and kind of like how, I mean, forgive me, I'm not exactly 100% sure what the guidance looks like in the Republic of Ireland at the moment. Is it the same situation?
It's an absolute fucking mess at the moment. The only way you can open a pub is if you serve food. They're saying 105 minutes is the most, and you need your premises clear by 11 o'clock. It's unsustainable in every sense of the word. Normally our venue would be 280 standing. We can do 50 to 60 in there seated, with 1 meter social distancing, but we can't open. The latest guidelines, which they contradicted within hours of it, they said, yes, you can go ahead with 50 capacity events, and then turned around and said, oh, no, sorry, that's just for theatres. They haven't mentioned music venues once at all in any of their announcements. They've reduced the size of outdoor events from 200 to 16. I know Lisa Hannigan's due to play in Kenny in a 800 capacity amphitheatre, which they reduced to a capacity of 200, and that gig was pulled. Like, it's insane. I had 2 acts playing in Dublin last night, on Saturday night in the Workman's Club, to 40 capacity shows. Now, we're lucky enough they were able to cover their petrol money out of it, but that's, you know, obviously that's about it. I've got 2 or 3 more coming up in Dublin where I'm renting the venue and running the shows just to put a few on. But legally, the guidelines were, you know, you can't do that, but they went ahead and operated and said, like, if the theatre can do it, why can't we? So there's a bit of that. It's just like, I don't know if we can open. So at the moment we're looking at turning our beer garden into some sort of food thing, just so we can maybe have 50 people. We can do 50 people in that bar, and then 50 people in the venue, and, you know, have 2 shows a day or something like that. Normally we'd have our full capacity be between the bars and the venue would be 400 to 500. So you're looking at a capacity now of maybe 100 people. Our landlord is still charging us rent. Been closed since March. like we can't afford to open. But we're going to have to.
I mean, I know that point around rent has been just a consistent issue for people, you know, in the UK, I presume, everywhere. That just been a non-starter, that conversation then.
It's vague at the moment. I mean, I'm not paying him rent at the moment.
That's not vague.
Yeah. He's saying it's due, but no. But you know, my lease is up in a year, so I don't know. It's a nightmare. I'm sure when push comes to shove, like if it goes to court, I can't see any decent-minded person kicking us out of the venue. But we can't open, so it's not a case of, you know, we're not because we won't make enough money.
The one argument I used with when discussing rent with a landlord for one of our venues was, so if you kick them out, who do you think is coming in to pay you rent? Because no one can open. And that's something that landlords don't seem to be appreciating, is that it's not as if they can kick somebody out and then somebody else is just going to come in and be able to open. No one can open. Their building is dead space at the moment, and they have to take that on board, but a lot of landlords don't seem to want to.
I think the problem is some of the landlords just don't care. I know a friend of mine who has a Michelin star restaurant in Galway, and his landlord said, I renew your lease, but it's going to be 60,000 more a year, or you can just get out.
Yeah, I mean...
The problem with that is property owners will always consider that, well, I can always turn it into residential.
Yeah.
And because particularly UK government are very pro converting whatever it was before into residential, we do run the risk that for some landlords, because you can't make a lot of money out of a music venue, that they're eyeing them up thinking, well, you know, if they close or if I can get them out, I'll just redevelop the building. And it's an ever-present threat when, in fact, the venues are in the commercial rental sector. And it's one of the things that's been really interesting talking to governments and the wider cultural sector about this is how grassroots music venues differ from other cultural buildings. Hardly any other cultural buildings have commercial landlords and commercial rents to deal with. Most of them are owned by some sort of trust or charity, or, you know, the body that operates them also owns the building. So it's actually one of the things that we're now doing quite a lot of work on, which circles back to where Music Venue Trust started, which was an intention to create ostensibly a national trust for music venues, which is where you buy the leases and you hold them in a charitable entity, and then you rent them at peppercorn rents to all the operators that currently operate them. So you remove the market forces from how you run them. You make them more financially viable because less of the money that they earn has to go on paying the rent. So they've got, in fact, more money for physical improvements or diversifying or, you know, whatever else it is that the people that want to run them actually want to do when they haven't got the money to do.
Just paying themselves to run their own venues, just making sure that the people who are running them are actually earning a living. So many venue owners are not earning a living because they can't pay the rent if they do.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is what we're now doing a big piece of work on, the potential for community ownership, because there's been an awful lot of love out there being shown for the grassroots music venues. So the question is, if people could invest in securing those venues in the future, and if they were owned by a charitable entity that wasn't aiming to make any profit, that just wanted to secure them, that would be a way of making the sector so much more sustainable should something like this happen again. Yeah. So, you know, that's where we are.
Securing leases like that in Ireland would be... I don't envy you the task of prying those leases out of landlords' hands.
Well, that's an issue. Although what's interesting, Googie, is if some of them were thinking of, you know, selling it for residential, some parts of the UK would actually be relatively cheap. Of course, you hit a massive problem if you try and buy anything in London or Manchester or Edinburgh or Glasgow or, you know, even Cardiff. There are certain cities where the property is just so much more expensive. But of course, if you look at the map of grassroots music venues across the UK, an awful lot of them are actually in smaller towns or even rural locations. And they ought to be prices that, if there was a property portfolio, it could acquire some of these leases. So there's no way we're buying 900 grassroots music venues. Of course we're not. But, you know, wouldn't it be lovely if we had some of them to start with? And as I say, that actually was the original intention of Music Venue Trust. That's what we wanted to do when we set up in 2014. And we sort of got involved in doing all these other things about trying to strengthen the business models and raise awareness about them and everything else in the meantime. But now we're going to swing back. But interestingly, I mean, Sam's venue is a community ownership model. So we do have some in the network that have done it themselves.
Yeah.
What we're just trying
We
to
still
do
have a commercial lease, which is the difference that we have. We do still have a commercial lease, but we are a community benefit society. And there is talk at the end of the 5-year term of our lease, because we've got a 10-year lease, but that there is in our lease, it's written in that potentially we will be buying it at the 5-year point, because that was written in, you know, by us, because that's what needs to happen, because our landlord's been charging us full rent. And it's just, I just think it's disgusting that, you know, even half rent, or, you know, my landlord's reasoning was that he didn't get a mortgage break because he has a loan. So let me just repay the value of your loan so that you don't miss repayments. Why do I still have to pay full rent? Why are you still making a profit? And I think that's the massive problem that a lot of music venues are facing, is that their landlords, they don't even want to break even. They still want to make a profit. And that's just disgusting.
Yeah, it's criminally unfair. I mean, I do think, just to pick up on that point and what Bev's just made, I think that, you know, we'll get onto this in a minute, but, you know, any positives or potential hopes for the future, I think an understanding and awareness of a need for new models around ownership of music venues is certainly up there. And, you know, the model around potentially community interest companies or community share issues or any of those kind of things has got to be part of that future, and our venue that we're establishing is a CIC for those reasons. Just conscious of time, I am, just as a heads up to everyone, to the 5 of you, before we finish, I will ask you for your kind of one kind of green shoot of hope, or your reason for optimism, or your kind of positive that you think that we can maybe drive towards over the next 12 months. Might be difficult, but I'm going to ask everyone to kind of offer up one. Before we do that, Rob, I just wanted to ask you, because when we were talking before the session, you made a point around how you were concerned about the impact of what's been happening specifically on younger artists. I know that a lot of the people who will be watching this webinar when it goes out as part of Out of Focus will be younger emerging artists. Just wondering, really, you know, what your thoughts were around that, and why you thought that it was particularly younger artists that were kind of feeling the force of this.
I mean, it's not been easy on anyone. Anyone in like the live ecosystem. I think when it does come back, I don't think this is going to bounce back how a lot of people hope it will. This is going to be a long, tough road that we're all going to be on. And there's a lot of like mental health issues that are coming into it as well, with younger artists and established artists, and the artist development side of it still needs to be present there. And I think that part in the ecosystem is being damaged, and we need to ensure that there is new talent being nurtured. And, you know, all of these conference festivals where you would discover these new bands at Great Escape, Liverpool Sound City, Focus Wales, we're not seeing them as we should. So they're missing out on a whole year, potentially 2 years. So they're being pushed right back. So that support network needs to be there for them, which I think comes down to absolutely everyone on the live side of the industry, is to be there and still give them an opportunity, because, you know, Avails from April onwards, 2021, they're near to nothing. We're booking as far as 2022 now, just to be able to bring some of our international artists over. So that's going to be really, really important. And, you know, we're missing things like tour managers and crews. These are people all dropping out of this industry right now, and they're really suffering too. If we don't have them to help bring them out, I think that's going to be a real issue as well. So it's something that does need to be addressed, even though there's so much already to kind of handle. But I think for me, that's a massive concern, is these younger artists coming out here, and the artist development side, that we might lose that. Hopefully we won't.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a part of the industry which has been, you know, in a constant kind of state of reconstruction anyway over the last 10 to 15 years. Artist development and the role that different entities play as an artist develops at different points in their career. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that, you know, it's just so open to not return in the way that it needs to. It's incumbent on everyone to make sure that energy is put in that area.
Yeah.
Okay, so in a desperate attempt to end on some kind of positive note, and I do thank everyone for maintaining a view of positivity through this conversation. What's giving you hope for the future? Where can we take this in a positive way, and kind of, you know, if the people who are listening to this webinar can cling on to something, what might that be? Who am I going to start with? Beverly.
The best people in the world work in music. And I genuinely think that this has been really tough, but there are so many lovely people. And it ranges from incredibly generous artists who've been doing things to help fundraise. I mean, honestly, so many of these artists have been approached by half the world asking them to do something for them, and not understanding that the artists are also really suffering because every plan that they had and their whole teams around them have had their worlds exploded too. But there's still been overwhelming generosity from so many artists, from so many music fans. Solidarity, as Googie said earlier and Rob said, you know, solidarity from people within the industry trying to support each other. And it's really, really tough out there. And some people obviously are doing better than others. The mental health concerns are enormous, Rob, absolutely, we know that. And just, you know, trying to make sure that when something good happens, that you're always saying, we need to take a moment to say this is good, in the absolute understanding that this is not happening to everyone and lots of people are still suffering. But wow, the people are amazing. And, you know, we've really been lucky in seeing a lot of love. And even though times are tough, I think we have to focus on the people.
Absolutely. Here. Bev.
I would just completely agree with everything that Beverly's just said. I think it's been great to see how the communities have come together, and not just the industry, but the fans. Everybody's been helping each other out. I've spoken to more people in the last 6 months, because usually we're all kind of got to get ready for this festival, and shit, I've forgotten something over there, and we haven't had the time to, you know, you'll bump into them at Great Escape or go for a beer at Focus Wales or wherever you meet up, and kind of have like half an hour of catch up. And it's been really great over the last 6 months to reconnect with people and have like, just get lost for 2 hours and go, oh bugger, it's 2 hours. But I think coming together, helping each other out, and especially with the what Rob was saying about emerging artists as well, got to take care of everybody at every different level that we can, but especially new and emerging artists that are coming into this going, is there anything for us to come into? And we've got to make sure that we're still putting our arms around those new artists and looking after them as the best we can. I think a lot of the us and them has disappeared over the last 6 months that we sometimes might have with, you know, agents versus bookers and promoters and all of that. And I think if there's any silver linings, I think there is going to be some better practices that we can all work together on together, so things are a little bit fairer, the playing fields are leveled a little bit more. But just being kind to each other, I think that's the most important thing, is looking after each other. We're all in these little tiny bubbles everywhere at the moment, so making sure that we're reaching out to people, and just remembering to be kind where we can.
Absolutely, be kind. That's one mantra we should all cling on to, 100%. Googie.
Once again, I'll agree with everything that's been said already. Glad I didn't have to go first. Other than the fact that I'm now quite accomplished at growing vegetables, as I'm sure a lot of people in this industry are. What I think is that when this industry, and be it from the customers to the performers to the crew, when it comes up for air, it's just going to be everyone gulping. There's just going to be such a palpable sense of relief across the entire industry, and that feeling of solidarity that we have at the moment is just going to spread out and fan out, because it's nice. I get text messages every day, every couple of days from bookers and promoters I know going, "How are you doing? You know, not good or not great. Yeah, you know, there's a sense of community here that I hope will permeate out through all the levels of the industry. Like Beverly said as well, no one in, you know, there's no one better at lateral thinking than people who work in the entertainment industry. So if there's anyone who can think their way out of this mess, then it's the people who've been putting on shows like this. I mean, if people can make festivals run on gaffer tape and bicycles, then they can certainly find a way to make gigs happen again. And I think that sense of community, the way people have built up their audiences, whether it be a weekly live stream or, you know, questions and answers on their Twitter page, I think the industry itself is going to be a warmer place for a little while. I think people understand that people are in predicaments. When agents now ask me for an offer and I laugh at them, they don't just hang up the phone now. They have a little laugh as well. So yeah, maybe the world will be a better place. Let's hope.
Let's hope. And yeah, I concur on the vegetable thing. I never thought I'd find myself getting excited about growing rockets in my garden, but there you go.
I've got amazing tomatoes.
Rob?
Agree with what everyone said. Definitely really well put by everyone. For me, I'm a tech geek. I'm really, really excited about the new ways that artists can engage with fans. It's never going to ever replace live music. We're all here because we love live music and being in a venue and being in, you know, surrounded by bodies. But I love the way of seeing how artists are now connecting with fans. We're seeing augmented live shows become a bigger thing, and they're happening. I think recently The Weeknd just did a huge one. Virtual reality is coming back, and Shangri-La at Glastonbury did a VR one, which was incredible. And just, you know, seeing how artists are utilizing the streaming, you know, it's a band-aid right now, but it's going to be something that stays here forever, I think, moving forwards. Like, this is our Napster moment. This is going to be a big change for live music, and it's going to be something to go alongside live performances. Never replace it. It's going to utilize it and be a great way for, again, new artists to geo-target into different areas before they spend £500-600 to go on the road or more. You know, they can see how they do. So I'm finding that really exciting right now and seeing where it's all going on the tech side.
Great, fantastic. Sam?
Really quickly, just before I say my little green shoots, I think it's really important with this being Focus Wales that we mention that if anybody is interested in community ownership, Community Shares Wales is a totally free service, and they will come and they will help you with all of the legal stuff that you need to make your venue or your business be community owned. And I think for me that ties into my green shoot, because the way, like, and into what everybody else has said, it's about the community and the way that we've all been able to harness our communities. And I think going forward, if we could, you know, potentially really, really concentrate on making sure that our grassroots music venues and our agents and our bookers and our festivals, that we all remain a massive community. Because as everybody else said, you know, we were all kind of, yeah, we all got on, but there was always this little bit of bloody agents, bloody promoters, that's not there anymore. You know, we are all genuinely just trying to get through this together. So yeah, I think that. And also, it's a bit of a weird one, but I always like to think about how lucky we are that this didn't happen like maybe 10 years ago, when we didn't have access to video chats as easily as we do now. And the work that Bev and I and the rest of the team at MVT have been doing would not have been possible as little as 5 years ago. So potentially, you know, there's at least the world waited 5 years until we had the technology to kind of deal with it before it shut us down. Because I missed seeing my daughter for 3 months, but I could still video chat with her every day. So little bits of hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we may all be kind of suffering from Zoom fatigue, but at least it's there as an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks very much for all of you for helping me to attempt to end this on a positive note. It's been a really enjoyable conversation, and hopefully everyone who's engaging with Out of Focus can get something from it, and comes away from it with a sense of, you know, a kind of an ember of a sense of optimism, which you know, I certainly share. So yeah, thanks very much, and hopefully see you all in a sweaty gig venue watching a live band sometime soon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.